I think it's slightly amusing when I stand behind these things because I am very short, as you can see. So I apologise for standing on my tippy toes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It really is a very great pleasure to be asked to speak with you today. And it was about a year ago, I think, when I first connected directly with farming on Jersey, thanks to silence in the ranks. Thanks to Andrew and the team at the Jersey Dairy, and I'm really thrilled that we're now working closely with the potato sector on the island as well. And just sort of before I dive into my talk, just on a personal note, sitting here and listening to the talks this morning is really, really inspirational. And I think, I go to a lot of conferences and seeing the resiliency and, the inspiration behind farmers really taking control of your situation on the island is, I really wish that in the UK we had the same kind of verve and vigour to do this. So it really is genuinely very, very inspiring. So it's a very special place. And as I say, I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you. My name's Anna. And as it says, I'm the Director of Business Development at Trinity Agtech, which is part of the Trinity Natural Capital Group. I better do my slides, really, haven't I? There we go. And as a group, our mission is to really democratise access to world-leading technology and science. And we serve that to the industry via really easy-to-use platforms. And I think that's really important. And they're designed for collaboration and, most importantly, decision-making. And really at the heart of everything that we do is a real genuine desire to help farming remain resilient and to encourage profitability and a business mindset to ensure that our food security and our environment can become more and more resilient. So with that in mind, today I'm going to speak about the 3 pillars of sustainability and how they interconnect. I'm going to discuss how we can leverage sustainability as a means of enhancing farm business and societal resiliency, and why this is important in a VUCA world. So probably the best place to start is, what does a VUCA world mean? What is VUCA? And why is this important for agriculture? So the term VUCA is an acronym, and it's used to describe volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's when these phenomena converge at the same time in a given period and affect society across multiple levels. And oftentimes the VUCA phenomenon is the result of a big global shake-up of climate, political, economic, ecological, and social development or decline. And I think it's probably fair to say, and I think we would all agree, that we're very much in a VUCA period at the moment. So the impact of VUCA on agricultural productivity will mean large variabilities in the scale and geography of production, which could relate to a mixture of environmental, political, or technological restrictions. And this is generating risks of major gaps in global sourcing and, of course, threatening food security. And I think we've seen from the talks this morning that food security for the island is a major thing. And certainly this view of the future may be quite unsettling, but we have choices to make. We could take a business as usual approach, ignoring the massive disturbances that are here, or believing we can simply ride them out without adapting. Or we can choose resiliency and face up to the nature and the urgency of the new era and adopting this resilient mindset. Now, of course, there's no quick fix, and we really need to dispose of any illusions of finding a quick fix. So instead, we've got to seek a more astute way to manage risk and to thrive as an agricultural industry. So these little circles that I've put up here might not be seen as positive, but actually we are already working with farmers who are focusing very clearly on how to be more resilient. And I think the farming industry in Jersey is an absolutely classic example of that. And it's this option that will see the farming industry rise to the challenges and to capitalise on new opportunities. An adaptive capacity is our ability to adapt and create conditions that enable us to anticipate and to respond to change and to recover from and minimize any negative consequences of said change. So, what are the drivers for the positive change across the industry? And when we consider our options for routes to net zero, as well as other sustainability and farming targets, it's important to remind ourselves of the factors driving us towards this. Certainly changes on how farming businesses are supported by the taxpayer, which we've heard a lot. It's like we planned this. We didn't. It's just, coincidental. But it's already having a huge impact on the decisions farmers are making on how to manage their businesses moving forward. Rising costs of farm inputs, reduction in chemistry, and the climate crisis necessitates changes in how we manage our land and how we produce food. But of course, we still have to produce food. We also need to consider the changes and perceptions of the consumer and how we balance environmental progress, buying habits, food security, and of course, the ability of the consumer to pay. So I've painted a rather droll picture, but actually, it's not quite all doom and gloom. Obviously, we need to be very eyes wide open. But at Trinity, we see the opportunity that arises for agriculture by exploring the relationships and potential of these convergences. Sustainability and resiliency, that's a mouthful. Sustainability and resiliency are intrinsically linked. And we believe that farming businesses are really well positioned to thrive and to adapt, and are a significant part of the solution to many of the issues facing society today. Often, and more so in recent years, sustainability is viewed only through the lens of climate-related issues. But actually, sustainability can be viewed under three pillars: financial, social, and environmental. So how does sustainability create a resilient farming business? So if we consider the relationships between some of the factors under each of these pillars, which relate directly to agricultural practices. So for example, in order for a farm to be financially sustainable over time, we need to think about keeping costs down. And never have fertilizer and fuel prices been so high. It's eye-watering. And as well as the direct usage of those inputs on the farm, of course, those price rises globally have also impacted the cost of bought-in feeds, vet and med, technology, everything. And this puts huge pressure on the farmer to be able to maintain profit. And if you couple that with the fact that the consumer themselves are tightening up spending, the pressure is compounded. And this is a classic example of the VUCA effect. One could consider environmental sustainability as a must-do box-ticking exercise. And of course, we are living in a very real climate crisis. I mean, we're in the middle of November and we're here in shirt sleeves, we're in a climate crisis. But farmers still have to farm, the world still needs to eat, and simply planting trees on prime agricultural land or going vegan is not the answer. But when we consider the relationships between financial and environmental drivers, we start to see a different picture. So let's consider carbon. Reducing carbon-related emissions globally is, of course, vital, and farming is the only industry which can actively sequester and lock up carbon. But of course, we're dealing with biological systems. The very nature of producing food also produces carbon. But there is so much that we can do on farm which reduces carbon-related emissions. And it just so happens that these reductions are directly correlated to reduction in costs and potential increases in yield. Therefore, whilst finances are tough on farm, and I'm not for a second suggesting that they're not, it's a really, really tough period. But by changing mindset and adopting slightly altered farming practices, can improve the farm's environmental position, which could significantly reduce farm input costs and open up opportunities for additional markets and protect current brand relevancy through provenance. So having a financially and environmentally sustainable business also means that jobs are protected, our farming heritage is protected, our collective environment is protected, and our ability to produce food is protected, which are all components of social sustainability. So considering all of these factors can be very overwhelming. And at Trinity, our work helps farming businesses identify and then optimize across pillars of sustainability. And we do this by considering a whole farm approach. And when we talk about a whole farm approach, we mean considering all of the components of the farming business and all of the contributing factors within each part of that. We should consider the complexities of accurate carbon accounting, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And we should measure and optimize other aspects of the farm ecosystem services, including biodiversity and water. And by considering all of these natural capital assets and by merging them with other technologies such as machine learning, advanced weather forecasting, and so forth, we can begin to challenge what may have been previously considered normal farming practice. And this in turn can help farmers to reduce and optimize inputs such as chemical fertilizers, which both massively reduce costs on farm, but also contribute significantly to the improvement in the farm's carbon position. And continuing to focus in on carbon for a moment, there are so many factors which contribute towards the carbon footprint of a modern farming business. Many early carbon calculators would just look at one or two components of the farming system, a very kind of thin slice. And not only can this misrepresent certain enterprises, and a key example of this, as I'm sure you know very well, is outdoor pasture-grazed livestock, where many calculators will only look at emissions and paint quite a negative picture on something that perhaps isn't as negative as it might seem. But it also limits our opportunities as an industry to make improvements at scale. And this is really important for an island like Jersey. We can't expect to efficiently and cost effectively make progress towards net zero targets as an industry without considering all of the component parts of this complex system. We also need to consider that it's not necessarily a given downward trajectory. Farming is a living thing, susceptible to many pressures, and of course, as I keep saying, we still have to produce food. So at Trinity, we encourage farmers to consider all of the components of their businesses. We don't retrofit models, and by that, for example, I mean we wouldn't use the same carbon calculation model for an arable system as a glass house, for a dairy cow, a beef cow, etc., etc. We think that this complexity can be a real opportunity for farmers as it provides them with more options to explore and to optimise. So Andrew showed a little snapshot of some of the types of metrics that we can look at. But within Sandy, each model in Sandy is specific to the enterprise in question, and the system then pulls all of them together to allow the user to explore all of the options towards net zero and other targets in a way that is specific to the uniqueness of their own individual farming business. And I think that's quite important. We cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach to this. And let's take dairy as an example. In this report, you can see the carbon footprint related to a very small dairy unit. There we go. And this is made up of emissions, less sequestration. So in this example, this small unit has a carbon footprint, i.e. they are producing about 28.5 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So they could be considered a carbon contributor. Or are they? In the same example, we've now considered the grass which the animal is grazed on. The land is sequestering, i.e. absorbing, over 100 tonnes of carbon dioxide. And this is a very, very small farming example. Well-managed pasture is a huge potential carbon sink. In this example, the pasture, there we go, the carbon sequestration. In this example, the pasture and the cow are part of the same system. And the farmers managing this pasture are therefore significantly impacting carbon in a positive way. In fact, without even considering the woody biomass associated with the farmland, and obviously, hedgerows on the island are a big thing, and I know you're looking to really increase volume and so forth. So woody biomass associated with the farm, this producer is sequestering circa 80 tonnes of carbon dioxide for that given year. So actually, it's a positive outlook. This is why we need to consider the whole story. Now, it's not always that clear cut, and certainly there are many farms which are not managed in an environmentally stable way. But the point is the outlook to not have to be as bleak and single-dimensional as perhaps it's made out to be in certain spheres. And this is why we've got to take a really well-rounded, data-driven decisions on complete science. And too often only a slice of the story is considered, which is frankly quite damaging to all parties involved. I just want to take a moment to talk at this point about carbon tunnel vision. And carbon tunnel vision is where we become so hyper-focused on carbon in isolation that we limit our opportunities as an industry for greater profitability, greater environmental sustainability, and we limit our ability to efficiently and cost-effectively tackle other big issues like food security, trade, income, etc., we've learned about this morning. And there's so much that we can do collectively to expand our horizon and increase opportunities for greater progress and prosperity without getting caught up in carbon tunnel vision. And it's a topic that we talk to government about in the UK a lot, and I think it's really important we need to take that well-rounded approach. Biodiversity plays a significant role in farm productivity, and I know Belinda's going to do a deep dive on that in a moment. Again, you'd think we planned it, but we didn't. As well as societal impact. So the preservation and enjoyment of our biodiversity-rich spaces, which on Jersey is obviously considered really important from a local tourism perspective. But evidence shows that farms with enriched biodiversity produce better grass or crops through pollinators, natural enemies, enriched soil biodiversity, and this is correlated directly to increased crop yields, performance in grazed livestock, quality of milk, and so forth. So I want to drill down again into a specific example of practice change on farm. One of the single biggest contributors to a farm carbon footprint and biodiversity score is tillage. And for this example, the farmer was to move from full tillage to minimum tillage, which I appreciate for the potato guys in the room is not a brilliant example, but for the purposes of illustration. Reducing tillage will reduce soil disturbance, which improves your carbon footprint. It also reduces fuel usage, hours on machine, all of which save money. And indeed, one of our customers reported to me just last week that they saved £56,000 in fuel last year by looking into these practice changes. Improved soil structure improves your water position by reducing runoff and enabling uptake efficiencies in cropping. And of course, soil biodiversity improvements contribute to carbon sequestration and overall crop performance over time. And of course, there are many, many other causes and effects and relationships, which I thought would get a bit messy if I tried to cram them all onto one slide, but hopefully that illustrates the relationships across the different pillars. So in conclusion, we believe that by taking a whole farm approach and by understanding and integrating all aspects of sustainability on farm, we can withstand the shocks generated in a VUCA era. But also we can derive new opportunities for farming to make greater strides towards net zero and most importantly to remain viable as businesses. But also making strides towards better rewards for our farmers, improving all aspects of environmental sustainability, not just carbon, stabilising our food security, listening to changing consumer demands, and considering public good at both a local and a global level. Finally, I'd just like to round up by sincerely thanking you for having me on the island today. The hospitality on Jersey is absolutely unrivaled, and it's been a really fantastic trip. We're really proud to be working with farming on the island, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more over the coming months. So thank you very much.